Let's see. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Stephanie Rivers and you're watching Girls Trip with LaVerne and Steffanie. I'm Stephanie Rivers. My co-host LaVerne Adekunle is on her way. Maybe she's stuck in traffic. I have no idea. But at any rate, we are moving on with the show. We want to welcome you to our TriCast. You're watching us on Facebook and YouTube and LinkedIn. And today we have a very special show that we want to, and a special guest that we want to talk about. I am in Tulsa, Oklahoma right now. And a lot of you I probably know, and I hope you know about about Black Wall Street. And the significance of that. And despite what a lot of people would have you believe that, only certain people knew about the Black Wall Street until last year, it's this year, 2021, is going to be the 100th anniversary of the fire and the Tulsa race riots that destroyed Black Wall Street. And there's going to be a special commemoration of that during the Juneteenth, Saturday, June 19th celebration. And so we have to talk with us, our guest today. He's Mr. Carlos Moreno, and he is a contributing writer of the Victory of Greenwood. And so welcome to the show, Carlos.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
So I appreciate you being available. And I just want to say that I realize, I come to Tulsa on business every now and then. And I was here a couple of weeks ago, and there was a big article on the front of the Tulsa World, the local newspaper, and they were discussing the upcoming events of the Centennial commemoration of the 1921 Tulsa race riots, and that was essentially the destruction and destroying of Black Wall Street. And so we'll get a little bit of history on that, but just wanted to really focus on what's going on today and how Tulsa is either moving past that or is at least acknowledging that history so they can, so residents and the country can move forward. So essentially, tell me, and I did read this in the article, but let's just talk a little bit about your history and how you got connected to to Black Wall Street, to the race riot commemoration, and like what was your interest, because you are not originally from Tulsa, and you're of Latino descent. And so, a lot of people, their genuine question might be, so why does a Latino care about what happened to the Black community 100 years ago?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is a bit of an interesting story. Like you said, I'm originally from the Bay Area in California. Grew up in Santa Clara, California. Went to San Jose State University. My girlfriend at the time, she's now my wife, so it worked out. She had invited me to come and be with her in Tulsa. So I moved here in 1998. And at the time, as a young graphic designer, as somebody, wanting to build up my career, I wasn't really given a lot of opportunities. Tulsa, back then, in 1998, and Tulsa even still today, is a very segregated city. And I wasn't really given a whole lot of opportunities. I wasn't really welcomed into the business community. But when I discovered the neighborhood of Greenwood, which back then was very, very small, and there wasn't really a whole lot going on. But what little was left of Greenwood, they really welcomed me and kind of took me in. And I had a great opportunity to work with several of the elders in Greenwood, and all of my first clients as a graphic designer, as a web designer, were in the Greenwood area. So with Greenwood Culture Center, the Oklahoma Jazz Hall of Fame, and especially the Oklahoma Eagle at the time, really took me in and gave me my first shot, so to speak. And working with the Oklahoma Eagle is really how I came to learn about the history of Greenwood, how it was founded, and of course about the Tulsa Race Massacre, and the history afterwards, how Greenwood was able to rebuild after the massacre, and its history and its importance during the Civil Rights Movement, and just its entire history, up until today. And it's just a story and something that I just kept very close, has been very close to me ever since, because of that connection.
Well, great. So, of course, I want to thank you for realizing the importance of it, and being a part of commemorating it, and whatever you're doing to bring light to it. One of the things with history, or with when there's an issue, whether it's something that you have to acknowledge in your family or in the city or in the community, is you have to acknowledge that there is a problem before you can move forward. So how has it been getting white residents of Tulsa to acknowledge, or that there was, and if it's not addressed, still is a problem with race in America, racism in Tulsa, and so that if for no other reason, history doesn't repeat itself?
Yeah. Yeah, we are going through a very interesting time. You may have seen on some headlines that have made the national news that the state of Oklahoma right now is going through a bill that is sitting on the governor's desk right now that would forbid schools from teaching about race and racism. And that's a huge problem. If we cannot teach about race, if we cannot teach about racism, then it's exactly what you said. History will repeat itself. And this story of the race massacre itself was intentionally buried for a very long time. It was not written about in the newspapers or any magazines or anything like that until 1971. The people who were there were criminally charged with inciting a riot, and their names were not cleared until 1996. And so the city after 1996 had this big conversation about, it was called a riot because these men were accused of causing a riot, but we have to change the name now, and really acknowledge what this was. Not a riot started by Black men, but a massacre that was perpetuated by the white establishment. There were 200 people that were white people who were deputized by the police department. This was a planned attack on Greenwood that was orchestrated by the Ku Klux Klan, and had collaboration and partnerships with the power structure of Tulsa. So that is something that Tulsa is really struggling with right now and grappling with right now, is uncovering the true history of this event, and really coming to terms with it. My own church, for example, the founder of the church is, I go to All Souls Church in Tulsa. It's a Unitarian church, and the founder is Richard Lloyd Jones, who also owned a newspaper at the time, the Tulsa Tribune, and he wrote an article on the afternoon of May 31st. And then the headline of that article is "Nab Negro for Attacking Woman in an Elevator." So if you're familiar with, or if you've seen, Lovecraft Country or HBO, The Watchmen, these shows, you know a little bit maybe about the history of Sarah Page and Dick Rowland in this encounter in the elevator. Well, everything that Richard Lloyd Jones wrote in this article is wrong. None of it's true. And so when you really pick apart the history of it, you start uncovering the truth, and who really did plan this attack and who's responsible for it. And that's a conversation that a tough conversation that we're really having in the city right now.
So what are we going to learn from your book, the Victory of Greenwood? What is it are you trying to address those wrongs or those storylines in the book?
That is definitely one of the things that I'm trying to do, is really look into, the way I describe it is like if you were to walk into the latest, greatest Marvel movie, right? And you walk into the middle of it and you just see 30 seconds of a fight. And you miss the hour that happened before, and you miss the hour that happens afterwards, right? And you just know about this 30 seconds. Then you don't really understand the movie, right? Because you don't know what happened before and after. Well, that is very similar to what we're dealing with this 2 days, May 31st and June 1st of 1921. There's so much focus on the massacre itself that we really don't have a full understanding of the very rich history of Greenwood, how it came to be, where it came from, being Native American owned land. The Cherokee tribe and the Creek tribe owned the land that would eventually become Greenwood. So I talk about that. I talk about the founders of Greenwood, and I also talk about the history of Greenwood after 1921. The fact that the neighborhood rebuilt after this horrible event. We have 1,256 homes that were burned down, 300 people who were killed, 6,000 people who were held in internment camps, and yet, and the reason that I named my book "The Victory of Greenwood" is yet. In spite of all of that, in spite of all of this trauma and disaster that happened to this neighborhood, Greenwood built back. And they built back better, and they built back stronger than they were before 1921. And that is, I think, a story that, to me, is even more important to know the resistance. B.C. Franklin sued the city. So you can imagine, one black lawyer, or it was actually two black lawyers, B.C. Franklin and I.H. Spears, but two black lawyers to sue the mayor, to sue the city of Tulsa, to sue the sheriff, to sue the chief of police. That took a lot of courage and resistance. And just knowing his story and the story of the lawsuit and the story of the rebuilding of this neighborhood, like I said, is just as important, if not, to me, more important than knowing about the history of the massacre. Obviously, it was an horrible event. We need to acknowledge that. We need to honor it. But I think we also need to honor the rebuilding and know that this neighborhood was a thriving neighborhood well into the late 1960s.
Wow. And so you're saying that now I'm hearing some feedback, and I'm not sure why. Let me see if I can turn down my audio. So I think that so you're saying that there's another whole chapter that nobody really, in addition to, the massacre itself, now the follow-up with the lawsuits and just in general knowing what happened afterwards, a lot of it has not been discussed or revealed. And that's what your book is going to be about. That's awesome. When can we expect that? And to know more about Mr. Carlos Moreno, and the Victory of Greenwood, you can go to, I'll put it in the chat, thevictoryofgreenwood.com. So when can we expect for it to be released?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we are taking pre-orders on the website right now. So if you're viewers out there would like to have a signed copy of the book, then go on the website right now and order that. We are anticipating that the books will be arriving very, very shortly to our office, and we'll be distributing them to local booksellers here in Tulsa. So the book will be available nationwide on Amazon as well as Barnes & Noble. So you'll be able to go online. And in fact, I think you can go on Amazon right now if you'd like, if you like to shop on Amazon. You can look for the Victory. Yeah, you can look for the Victory of Greenwood there, and it's available for pre-order there. The official published date will be June 2nd. And we chose that intentionally because while May 31st is the centennial of the massacre, June 2nd is the centennial of the rebirth of Greenwood. In fact, there was a man, and his name escapes me. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but there was a man who on June 2nd. So this was a day after that this horrible massacre occurred. Not only did he help the community, in the cleanup efforts and the relief efforts and the healing, but he actually set up a tent, a folding chair, and got out his razors and reestablished his barbershop. I mean, the very next day. So, to me, the story of the Victory of Greenwood is that the people of Greenwood and this neighborhood would not let this massacre, not let this disaster define who they would become, and not let it define their potential. And that, like I said, they came back. Many of the businesses reopened. Lula Williams, who owned the Williams Dreamland Theater, reopened her theater on September 14th of the next year. So what we see is a great comeback of Greenwood, and that's really kind of the story that I wanted to put front and center.
So now I am showing that if you want to know more about what's going on for the Juneteenth celebration, everyone can go to Tulsa2021.org, and that will discuss and give some insight into what is going to be going on that for that event. But before we go more into that, I do want to talk with you about, because I'll be trying to do too much. I want to talk with you about in your book, do you have is there any mention of, or do you have contact with survivors or people who had family members who survived? And how hard or easy was it? How challenging was it to get cooperation from people for their input for the book?
That's an excellent question, and I'm really glad that you acknowledge the descendants of these families. So the book is put together. I didn't want to just write another history book. There are plenty of history books out there. If you want to read about the history of the massacre, read about the history of Greenwood, what this book is The Victory of Greenwood is a series of biographies. So each chapter, I profile an individual or a family who was historically significant in the history of Greenwood. People like O.W. Gurley, E.L. and Jeannie Goodwin, John and Lula Williams, and throughout the process of researching and writing the book, we reached out to quite a few of the descendants. For example, I talked to Jennifer King, who is a descendant of Mabel and Presley Little, and forming these relationships and talking to the descendants of some very difficult conversations. Obviously, lots of generational trauma. Trauma carries, and you may know this, trauma carries on generation after generation. So it may not be something that specifically happened to you, but if it happened to a grandparent, then you still have that trauma in your family, down into the DNA level. That's, there's new medical science that's actually proven that. So these are difficult conversations to have, and, trusting somebody, especially somebody who's, not Black, somebody who's not from Tulsa, gaining that trust and forming those relationships was a very important part of the project, for me, to honor these families and to really gain their trust and work with them, because these are their stories. It's not my story. This is, so these are very, personal, obviously very personal narratives. And in some cases, some of the stuff in the book is information that I got from the families that, you wouldn't have been able to find in the public records and things like that. So, so again, it was very important for me to speak with the descendants of the families that I'm profiling in this book. And so that's been a great honor for me. And something that I'm very grateful for is to have the trust of the Greenwood community that I could tell these stories and put them out there in the public.
Well, I'm certainly going to get I'm going to order my copy, and I'm awaiting anxiously the book to be published. And so, will you be on hand during Juneteenth, the celebration at the? Now, I know it's you said that the community Greenwood is where Black Wall Street was, and you said that they have started to rebuild. And although I've been to Tulsa a couple of times, I have not been to the actual place where the Greenwood Community Center is. And I know they're under a renovation project, and I'm assuming they're going to be ready for Juneteenth. So talk to me a little bit about, if you can, because I know you're not affiliated with the center, but will you be on hand? Have you talked about your book being turned into a documentary or some type of visual production of the book?
Yeah. So, well, so there are going to be several events happening between now. Actually, the library is doing, and you can go to the Tulsa Central Library's website and kind of see the series of events that's happening now. There will be different events in the community throughout the month of May. The Admiral Twin Drive-In, for example, is going to be screening a documentary on Wednesday, the 26th. The Greenwood Culture Center is doing a luncheon on the 30th. And so there's definitely lots of events and a lot of activity in the community. And as you mentioned, the Tulsa2021.org website, you can see all of the events and different activities. And so, as we're in this weird time of COVID, and not, organizations not wanting to have huge gatherings, some of these events will be virtual. Some of them will be hybrid, where they'll have some limited attendance in person, but you can also watch online. And so there will be some opportunities for people to attend in person if you're here in Tulsa, or to even just watch virtually. There's a lot of virtual events. There's a documentary. Russell Westbrook will be premiering his documentary about Greenwood, and especially about what's going on in Greenwood today. Because there are issues, like you mentioned, happening still in Greenwood today. Things like gentrification is a very real thing in Greenwood and in North Tulsa. And so, really looking at, what the city needs to do to acknowledge this event, honor it, but also move on and solve some of these real problems that we have in North Tulsa. And I mentioned before, Tulsa is such a segregated city. When you say North Tulsa, that's really synonymous with saying Black Tulsa, because that's honestly where almost all Black Tulsans live, is in just one part of the city. It's very, very segregated. So I think that's something that we really need to talk about as a city, and something that we really need to overcome. Why is there such this division between Black Tulsa and White Tulsa? It shouldn't be that. And there's if you go to East Tulsa, that's kind of the Latino part of town. So why are we all separated in our own almost separate cities? It's almost that way. It's almost like it's almost like we're three different cities, and it shouldn't be that way. I've never, been had any problems at all whatsoever visiting any part of town. But there are people who live in South Tulsa who will not go to North Tulsa, and vice versa, And so I think that that's something that we really need to work to overcome as a city.
And I know you just mentioned Russell Westbrook, who is a NBA player, and I guess for the Oklahoma City, I forgot the name of the team.
Oh, the Thunder. Mm-hmm.
So, and I did read about that as well. He has put forth some time and money to develop a production that focuses on the race riots and the massacre, and so people are doing their own version, or their own way of addressing the issue. And so as far as the development of Black Wall Street and that area of Greenwood, what is it that you think that people who currently live here now can do to further that? Because when I asked you, if you were affiliated with the Greenwood Cultural Center, you said, well, no, but you're doing what you can to address the issue. What can residents do to further the cause and the further their city's acknowledgement and development to move forward, in your opinion?
Yeah, well, I just think that the very first step is to really just have more of an open mind. Like I said, Tulsa is an incredibly segregated city, and there are still to this day people who live in South Tulsa that will not go on the other side of the tracks, so to speak. And so I think that's something that people can do is have a little bit more of an open mind. Formed relationships with people in Greenwood, and some of those relationships still continue to this day, 20 years later. I've done as much as I can to support Black-owned businesses. So I think that's hugely important. I'll tell you one really great story. There's a mansion who was owned by the leader of the Ku Klux Klan. His name was Tate Brady. And he designed his mansion. He modeled his mansion after Robert E. Lee's home. He's, like I said, the leader of the Ku Klux Klan. So he did a lot of terrible things, including being the mastermind behind this massacre. Well, Felix Jones, who was an NFL player, bought Tate Brady's mansion and has turned it into a collective for Black artists. And you may have seen that the Fire in Little Africa album was picked up by Motown Records. So those hip hop artists, from Oklahoma City and Tulsa area are now being put on a national stage, and this work is being done from this mansion. So out of what this terrible person did, Tulsa is taking this back and transforming it into something that's incredibly positive for the Black community. So I think projects like that, supporting Fire in Little Africa, supporting the artists that are coming out of Tulsa, the Black artists that are, really doing some amazing work here. There's a new sneaker shop that opened up a little while ago that is on the site of where there used to be a shoemaker on Greenwood, and a brand new gallery that's opening up, the Greenwood Art Gallery, and she would be unique. This is Queen Alexander, who's owner of a Black art gallery, and that's pretty unique, especially in this region. So I think people, supporting these Black-owned businesses and organizations, supporting the work that these folks are doing. As soon as I heard about Fire in Little Africa, the album, I said, put me down. I want T-shirts. I want a copy of the album. I want posters. I want everything, because I do want to support these artists and the great work they're doing.
Wow. So, this is inspiring me to maybe come during that weekend and go live from the scene. I don't know if the local media has, what they plan to do, but we can't wait for local mainstream media to give credence or care that much about what we're doing in our community. We have to do it ourselves, regardless of what they are doing. So I'm certainly going to reach out to someone about that. And you're right. Just I think a good step is to support Black businesses, to, because we're going to spend the money anyway. You're going to buy a T-shirt, you're going to buy tennis shoes, you're going to get a haircut anyway. At least, I cut my own hair, but most people, are going to spend that money anyway. So it's important to spend those dollars where it will turn over in our community. So again, we want to thank you for your commitment to this story. And I'm going to go to do my pre-order for the book. And I probably didn't mention to you in our getting ready for this interview, but I do have a production company, and we want to talk with you about your book and what we can do to make it go beyond its printed version. So we'd love to stay in touch with you. And so what are you working on other than the book, or what other projects can people look from you? And do you want us to be able to get in touch with you in another way besides the victoryofgreenwood.com? Is there, do you have, what's it called? Social media handles that we can
Right.
put out there, or an email or a phone number or anything?
Well, yeah, the victoryofgreenwood.com has all of those. So we are on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. And all those links are on the website. So you can go there and find us on social media. That is the main website, the main place to find out everything we're doing. We are working on a children's book. And we've partnered with a publishing company. Book was a kid's book about racism. They've since published 40 other books, and this year we partnered up with them to create a kid's book about the Tulsa Race Massacre. This, you wouldn't normally think of a topic like this as so heavy, to develop a children's book for it, but children are going to be watching these documentaries, watching these TV shows like Watchmen and Lovecraft Country. It's going to be on the news. They're gonna see it anyway. And so really this kid's book is more a tool for parents to be able to know how to speak to their children. Age, and the age group for this book is, kindergarten through about that third or fourth grade age range. Really a tool for adults to know how to talk to their kids about what they're seeing in the media. Anyway, like I said, there's going to be so many projects and documentaries and films and things like that. They're going to watch this anyway. They're going to see it anyway, and they're going to be asking questions like kids always do. And so for us, this book is really a tool for the parents to really know how to have these conversations. Tulsa wasn't unique. There were race massacres that happened throughout the teens and 20s, from the Wilmington insurrection to the Rosewood Massacre to Red Summer in Chicago in 1919. Tulsa was the worst of it. We had the worst in terms of the number of deaths and the amount of property damage. 40 blocks of Tulsa was burned down. So Tulsa definitely got the worst of it, but it was definitely not unique. It was these types of events happen throughout the country, in many, many different places, especially throughout the South. And so we think this is a really good tool to, discuss that, talk about, why these events happened, and really have these hard conversations, because it's the next generation, right? That is going to, be better than our generation, at these interracial relationships, and knowing the history and talking about it, and not being afraid, and not hiding from this history. Because I think that's a big reason why we're so segregated and so divided, is that we can't have these conversations,
I agree. So we want to it's true that children, we think we shouldn't include them in the conversation, but they are going to hear it and talk amongst themselves, and so we might as well address the issue on a level where they can absorb the story, as best we can, and help them through it, and help them to hopefully do better by each other, and by what is expected of them as they transition. So that's a great it's a good idea, and so if you have any if someone wants to create their a book, or if they have some type of way that they want to address the issue, are you is like, what would you suggest for them to do that? Do you have a production company, or do you have a way of helping them, or should they just go to, I mean, I guess they can go to Greenwood, go to your website to learn more information and how to contact you? Is that the best way?
Yeah, I would say it's both, really. I think it's really important to not just do some research online and then write an article or write a book. We were really, and I say we, I mean, I wasn't the only person working on this project. Meg Sutherland is our head researcher. We had assistant researchers, Ray Stone. We hired a consultant, Dr. Wendy Wilkerson. We hired a graphic designer, a very talented graphic designer by the name of Trey Thaxton, to do all the graphic design for the book cover and those kinds of things. So it was definitely a team effort. We're very intentional about visiting the Greenwood community often, speaking with the people in the community, understanding their history and where they're coming from. So that was a huge part of the process for us. And looking inside of, what was our intention? Why were we doing this? And for me, the reason why is retelling the stories that were told to me, as sort of a way of giving back, but also uncovering these truths, that and telling the stories that not a lot of people know about, like of Greenwood, and the fact that Greenwood was such a key player in the civil rights movement throughout the country, and telling the story of people like Emmett J. McHenry, who was partially responsible for inventing the commercial internet as we know it. So the reason I can even have a .com is because of Emmett J. McHenry, and nobody talks about. We hear about Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates, but we don't hear about Emmett J. McHenry, who grew up in Greenwood, graduated Booker T. Washington, and went on to become the founder of Network Solutions, one of the largest internet companies in history. So we need to tell these stories, and we need to. There's so many more stories I wish I could tell. And there's a lot more history to uncover that we still don't know. So I feel like we've just scratched the surface. I feel like there's, my book is 25 chapters, but there's hundreds more chapters that need to be written, right? So, we're hoping that this becomes a project that just continues to grow from here.
And I agree. So I'm going to commit to having a few more shows before Juneteenth, the celebration of people connected to this story. So if you can help me to find some people who would want to come on and talk about their viewpoint, whether that's descendants of survivors or some of the new business owners in the Black Wall Street Greenwood community, that would be awesome. So we want to thank you for coming on, and we certainly want to stay in touch with you as your book becomes published and we move forward. And I wish you much success in the other projects that you have going on. So we've been talking to Mr. Carlos Moreno, and thank you so much for being a part of the show.
Thanks for having me, Stephanie. It was great.
All right, thank you. And then I'm going to close out with our show opening now, because you probably already have guessed. I'm the behind the scenes, I'm the switcher, the talent, everything. So At any rate, you have a great day, and we will talk to you soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All righty.